The backyard of my mother's house in Portland was brightly decorated with pink and blue ribbons, helium balloons floating gently in the air, and a hum of laughter and conversation all around. It was an early summer day, clear skies, soft sunlight. We were hosting our baby's gender reveal party, something I had once imagined would be one of the most beautiful memories of my life. I was 6 months pregnant, and even though there had been more silence than usual between Mason and me lately, I convinced myself he was just anxious about becoming a father. I had invited over 30 people, mostly relatives from both sides and a few close friends from college. Everyone was smiling, holding mocktails, waiting for the moment Mason and I would pull the cord together, sending hundreds of colored confetti pieces into the sky. I wore a white maxi dress, my hair down, my hands trembling slightly from both excitement and exhaustion after the preparations. Mason stood beside me, his shirt crisply pressed, his face like carved stone, calm in a cold way. When I turned to say something to him, he only smirked. I forced a smile, telling myself I was being overly sensitive. 3, 2, 1. He pulled the cord. Oh. A burst of pink paper shot into the air, swirling in the breeze. The entire yard erupted. Cheers rang out. "The girl, congratulations!" My mom hugged me tightly. My best friend Lisa even burst into tears from emotion. But as applause and radiant smiles surrounded me, Mason didn't even look up. No smile, no hand on my belly, nothing he once promised. Instead, he stepped back, pulled a white envelope from his blazer pocket, and extended it toward me. Before I could even grasp what was happening, he spoke, clear and cold as steel. "I can't do this anymore, Nova. I'm in love with someone else. These are divorce papers." The music stopped abruptly. Someone dropped a glass. I heard it shatter, though I couldn't tell if the sound came from the drink table or my own chest. I stood frozen, staring at the white envelope in his hand. His words still echoed in my ears like the shriek of a train whistle piercing through my skull. "What did you just say?" my mother screamed, almost in disbelief. "In front of her, in front of everyone?" Mason didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on me, like he was testing how fast I would break. Around me, jaws dropped. My friends looked stunned. My elderly neighbor covered her mouth. Lisa stepped forward, her voice shaky with fury. "Mason, are you out of your mind? This is your baby's gender reveal." "Exactly," he shrugged. "I thought this was the right time. She deserves the truth. I can't fake this anymore." As he spoke, I felt like I was hearing a stranger. The man who once held me close now stood like I was something he couldn't wait to walk away from. And then, like a hairline crack spreading into a full fracture, I just stared at him for a few seconds. Then slowly turned to the stunned crowd and said quietly, "I have an announcement too." My voice was soft, but each word pierced the heavy air like a needle. Mason didn't move. My mother blinked at me, speechless, her lips slightly parted. Lisa's eyes widened. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile, the kind you wear when you've seen the storm coming, and chose to stand still and wait for it. I met Mason during sophomore year in a night philosophy class I almost skipped because I was exhausted from a shift at work. I sat in the back row, struggling to stay awake and take notes when he walked in late, wearing a wrinkled hoodie, hair a mess, smiling absent-mindedly. He sat next to me like he'd known me forever, leaned over and asked to borrow a pen. "I could repay you with a latte after class." I laughed. He looked at me like I was the most interesting person in that room full of theories. From that day on, Mason stuck to me like a shadow. He knew how to make me feel special. Every morning text, every handwritten goodnight note slipped into my library cubby. My friends called him the guy of tiny gestures that haunt you forever. We were together 6 years before we got married. I thought I knew him. The warm smile, the humor, the way he listened. But if I'd paid closer attention, I might have seen the cracks long ago. Back when we were dating, Mason often disappeared for hours without a clear reason. When I asked, he always had an explanation: helping a friend move, car trouble, dead phone battery. So convincing, I felt guilty for doubting him. His phone was always face down, At first, I thought it was just a habit, but one day, I caught him yanking it off the charger and shoving it into his pocket the moment I walked in. That's when things started to feel off. Once, while using his laptop to send an email, I noticed he hadn't logged out of his Google account. His search history popped up: fancy restaurants in Seattle I'd never heard of, spa packages for couples, even searches for how to plan a surprise proposal. The weird part? That was nearly a year after we were already married. When I asked, he just shrugged. A friend at work asked me to look stuff up. You know how clueless those guys are about romance. Then he laughed and wrapped his arms around me from behind. Don't overthink it. I love you. And I chose to believe him. After the wedding, Mason stopped writing me those notes. Our evening talks on the balcony faded. He came home late often, sometimes saying he had executive meetings, other times blaming traffic. But he worked freelance in software. Most of his job was remote. I started counting my dinners, alone. One night, I made his favorite barbecue dish and waited 3 hours. No sign of him. His phone was busy. Around midnight, I got a single text. Crashing at Ethan's. Talk tomorrow. I'm not the suspicious type, but something inside me began to stir. Quiet and heavy. Every time Mason smiled, I wondered if that smile was still meant for me. One night, as we lay quietly in the living room under the soft yellow glow of a lamp, I asked, Mason, is there something you're not telling me? His stare lingered until the silence felt heavy enough to choke me. Nova, you're exhausted from the pregnancy. Don't let your imagination make things worse. I never brought it up again, but from that day on I started paying attention to every little detail: the number of times he left the house without a reason, the messages he ignored, the flicker of anxiety in his eyes whenever I got close to his phone. Something was slipping through my fingers, but Mason left no clear trace, just a growing emptiness between us. I often stayed up late, hand resting on my belly, wondering if the baby inside me could feel the things I was trying so hard to hide. I didn't want my child to grow up in cold silence, but I also didn't want to end a family over a vague feeling. Until the day I found a handkerchief in Mason's jacket pocket, embroidered with the initials HR. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't anyone I knew. The perfume wasn't mine either. It didn't belong in our home. I knew then, whatever time Mason and I had left, it wasn't much. I just didn't know when or how he'd shatter it all. Since discovering the handkerchief with HR stitched into it, I began living in two parallel worlds. One version of me was the gentle Nova, carrying our baby girl. The other was silent, observant, quietly tracking every thread Mason tried to hide. I stopped asking questions or trying to pull him back, because I finally understood. The more I searched for truth from the mouth of a practiced liar, the more invisible wounds I would collect. But silence didn't mean surrender. I was simply stepping back to see things clearly. The last time I tried confronting Mason was during the 26th week of my pregnancy. That night he came home late, reeking of alcohol, and didn't even ask if I'd eaten or how I was feeling. I sat at the edge of our bed, the soft lamp casting light on my round belly. Mason, I said, my voice eerily calm, are you cheating on me? He paused, just long enough to make me hope for honesty, then laughed. A laugh without the slightest hint of guilt. Nova, you should write mystery novels. That's a great question. Then he walked away. Didn't even glance back at me. I sat there for a long time. The answer was so clear, no confirmation was needed. The next morning, I called the one person I knew wouldn't judge me. Ivy. My best friend from high school. The one who stood by me at my wedding. The one who once joked she'd tear the city apart if Mason ever made me cry. Nova, enough, Ivy said after I told her everything. You can't just wait for him to confess. You need to know the truth. You need to protect yourself. I was quiet for a while, then said, I don't know where to start. I have a guy, Ivy replied quickly. Private investigator. My sister used him during her divorce. His name's Caleb. Discreet. I hesitated. It takes a lot of courage to trust a stranger, but it was even scarier to keep living in the dark. 3 days later, I met Caleb at a small cafe on the east side of Portland. He looked to be in his early 40s, calm demeanor. After I explained the situation, he asked me one thing. Are you ready to see things you don't want to see? I clenched my hands and nodded. I've already faced the fear of betrayal, now I just fear not having enough proof to protect my daughter. We exchanged some information. Mason's work schedule, places he frequented, the name of the architecture firm he claimed to be collaborating with. I even gave him screenshots of our credit card statements I'd quietly taken from the bank website. Act normal, Caleb instructed. Live like you know nothing, I'll take care of the rest. In the days that followed, I learned to play the role of the sweet, trusting wife. I cooked, smiled, asked the right questions at the right moments, and pretended to believe every word Mason said. But inside, I was counting hours. I lived on Caleb's brief updates. Each message, another quiet cut. 10:43 p.m., Mason just entered Avalon Hotel. No company meeting scheduled. 8:20 p.m., spotted Mason dining with a brunette at Moonrise Restaurant, very affectionate. 9:05 p.m., Mason just bought a piece of jewelry from the same store where he once bought your wedding gift. I wanted to scream every time I read those, but instead I gripped my phone until my knuckles turned white. Some nights I'd wake up at 3 a.m., bolt upright in bed, feeling like I was living someone else's life. Mason still came home, still played the part of a charming husband, but now, every word he spoke became new evidence. I memorized every fake smile, every recycled excuse. It took me nearly a week to sit still after receiving the photo from Caleb. A shot of Mason and the woman leaving the Avalon Hotel. She wore sunglasses, soft waves in her hair, walking with confidence as if nothing needed to be hidden. But what sent a chill down my spine wasn't her stride. It was her necklace, a white gold chain with a blue topaz pendant. I'd seen it before. In a gift box hidden in Mason's desk drawer a month ago. When I asked, he said he'd ordered it from Europe as a gift for a demanding female client, an executive about to sign a big deal. Client, huh? I laughed through tears. I texted Caleb. I need more. Audio recordings, any conversation. I need this to hold up legally. He replied with just one line. I'm on it. Start preparing your part. My part. I knew exactly what that meant. The next day I met with a lawyer, a woman named Marlene Keller in her 50s, someone Ivy had mentioned before. Her office was on the third floor of a small building in Fremont. She listened to my story with a steady, non-judgmental gaze. When I brought up the baby, she nodded slowly. You want to secure the assets or full custody? She asked. Both, I replied. Good, Marlene said with a faint smile. Then we'll go slow and steady. Leave no gaps. It took me nearly 3 hours that day to sign all the necessary documents, the draft divorce papers, the petition to transfer ownership of the house into my name, and the contingency order to freeze our accounts if financial fraud from Mason was detected. Every signature pushed him further out of my life. And I didn't hesitate. I also asked Miss Keller to secretly open a savings account in my daughter's name, with only me and the baby listed on it, no third-party access. I want my child to grow up without carrying her father's stains, I said. I don't need his money. I just want peace. As I left the law office, I felt lighter, like a boulder had been lifted from my chest. But I knew it wasn't over. Mason still had no idea about the storm building beneath what he thought was calm water. Caleb kept sending me short recordings, each one a stepping stone toward the gender reveal party. In one clip, Mason's voice oozed mockery. Just wait till she sees the divorce papers. Her face will collapse, she's that weak. I saved the clip, unedited, untouched. I placed it in a folder labeled Nova_Rising. Each night I played it all just to remind myself that this was no longer the man I loved. This was someone who had planned to humiliate me on what should have been the happiest day of our lives. I started planning the party, down to every silver candy bead. I chose to host it at my mother's house in Portland, with its spacious, private backyard. Every decoration was checked by me and Lisa. I wanted perfection, not just to impress. I needed everyone to be there, on time, in place. The guest list was carefully curated. I invited Mason's entire family, the same people who once saw me as not good enough. I invited a few of his old friends, the ones who would definitely call around afterward. And of course, I didn't forget her. I wrote the name as Haley Roberts, the exact initials embroidered on that handkerchief. Lisa was stunned by how meticulously I worked. One afternoon she pulled me aside and whispered, "Nova, what exactly are you planning?" I gave her a soft smile, more patient than pleased. "It's not revenge, it's just making sure he has no way out." 3 days before the party, I received Caleb's final message. "I've sent everything to your email, photos, receipts, and recordings. Enough for you to end it all." That night I sat alone in the nursery, surrounded by folded baby clothes. My hand rested on my belly. The baby kicked softly, like an answer. "We're almost there," I whispered. "I promise. You won't grow up in a house built on lies." And I knew the upcoming party would be the final chapter. That afternoon, my mother's garden looked like a summer postcard. Pink and blue flags shimmered in the sunlight. The 3-tier cake was frosted in soft pastels, and at the center of the lawn stood a large white wooden box. The one holding the gender reveal balloon. People laughed, took photos, clinked glasses. Everyone believed today would be a beautiful memory for Mason and me. And they were right. Just not the way they expected. Mason wore a charcoal button-down, his tie knotted just loosely enough to appear like a busy husband who still cared about a family event. He walked around shaking hands, smiling politely, wrapping his arm around me from behind when the photographer raised his camera. But his eyes didn't meet mine. They looked just over my shoulder, as if checking to see who was watching. As for me, I kept smiling, still played the role of the gentle, glowing wife awaiting her baby girl. Lisa leaned in and whispered just as everyone began to gather around the box. "You sure? It's time." Mason stepped beside me, his arm draped around my shoulder as if everything were normal. He leaned in, voice low but sharp enough for me to hear. "You ready? I think it's time we wrap up this little performance." The look in my eyes, if he had paid attention, should have told him everything. But Mason never really saw me, only what he thought he controlled. The host began the countdown. 3, 2, 1. Mason and I pulled the cord. The balloon burst. A shower of pink paper rained down like fireworks. The garden erupted in cheers. "It's a girl!" Applause rang out. My mother wiped a tear. Aunts and uncles smiled warmly. Lisa gently squeezed my shoulder. But I didn't take my eyes off Mason. When Mason handed me the envelope with the divorce papers, I simply smiled. A smile that made his face go stiff. "Thank you," I said softly. Then I pulled a thick folder from my dress pocket, neatly sealed in a plastic sleeve. I held it up, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. For the past several months, my husband, Mason Taylor, has been having an affair. And not with a stranger. He paused. "It's with Haley Roberts." My mother's eyes widened. Mason's closest friends covered their mouths. And across the yard, Haley, in a deep red dress, standing near the dessert table, froze like someone had slapped her. I walked to the laptop Lisa had set up, already connected to the big screen hanging from the tree frame. I opened a folder labeled Truth. Mason rushed toward me. "Nova, what are you doing?" "Just giving you what you planned for me," I said, eyes fixed on the screen. The first photo appeared, Mason holding Haley's hand, entering the Avalon Hotel. Next, the two of them sitting close in a cafe, laughing. Then the hotel booking receipts, the jewelry receipt, and finally, audio clips, short but clear. "Nova has no idea. After the party I'll give her the papers, everything will be done." The crowd was silent. I heard nothing but my own heartbeat. I turned back and pulled a divorce paper from the folder. "This is the divorce I signed 3 weeks ago. My lawyer is ready. The house, the accounts, the cars, they're all in my name." Mason went pale. "You can't." "I can, and I already did." I paused, pulling out one last envelope. My gaze softened as I held it. Final thing." I stepped closer to him and spoke slowly. "The baby I'm carrying is not yours." Gasps rippled through the garden. Mason staggered back, barely able to stand. "What? Nova? Who?" I looked toward the corner of the garden, where a quiet man stood. Lucas Grant. My childhood friend who had silently supported me through it all. He's the one who stayed when you disappeared, the one who sees my worth, and the only one who's never lied to me. I placed the DNA test results in Mason's hand, then whispered, "You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone, Mason? Well, congratulations, you just did it. To yourself." Mason said nothing as I laid the results in his palm. His eyes were lost, his face frozen in terror. The man who once thought he controlled everything now stood hollow, unraveling. No one stood with him. My mother turned away, speechless. Lisa crossed her arms, her face twisted in disgust. Mason's family stood paralyzed, then slowly left the garden, one by one, without a backward glance. As for Haley, she stood stunned, her eyes darting nervously as her father, Mr. Richard Roberts, walked up to her, his gaze more serious than I had ever seen. "My granddaughter will not grow up around someone like you," he said, each word firm though quiet. "From this day on, don't step into my home again." Haley burst into tears, tried to say something, but he had already turned his back. By the time I left the party, she had vanished, as if disappearing into the air, along with the dignity she had just lost. In the days that followed, Mason tried to reach me. Texts, emails, even flowers sent to my mother's house. He wrote, "I was wrong. I didn't realize how far this had gone. I want another chance." I let the silence speak for me. He wasn't reaching out from remorse, only fear. Fear of losing everything. The video from the party went viral soon after. No one knew who uploaded it, but within 3 days it had over 400,000 views. Some called me cruel, others called me brave. But for me, the only thing that mattered was that I was no longer blind. The company Mason worked for initially stayed silent, but once the press picked up the story, they issued a formal statement terminating him for serious ethical misconduct affecting the organization's image. He lost his job, lost his friends, and had no one left standing beside him. I gave birth to my daughter on a lightly rainy November morning in a quiet room at Providence Medical Center. My mother sat in the corner gripping my hand. Lucas stayed by my side, his gentle gaze steady through all 10 hours of labor. When the nurse placed the baby in my arms, I whispered, "Welcome to the world, Ilara." That name I had chosen long ago. It means light from the stars. And she was exactly that. A light shining through days when I once saw no future. Lucas held Ilara gently, his voice unsteady. "I never thought I'd cry over a baby." What I felt for him wasn't urgency or romance. It was steady, warm gratitude for everything he'd carried beside me. He didn't replace anyone. He never tried to take Mason's place. He simply stayed. Installing the crib, mixing formula, folding baby blankets, driving me to postpartum checkups. And more than anything, he stayed when I said nothing. No love confession, no promises, but each day, Lucas's presence gave me peace. I returned to my freelance marketing work 4 months later. My mother watched Ilara whenever I had meetings or urgent deadlines. We moved into a small apartment in North Portland, near the park filled with maple trees I used to love as a child. I planted a patch of lavender by the porch. Every morning I'd carry Ilara outside and tell her about simple things. The smell of fresh soil after rain, the sound of wind brushing through the fence. I didn't need more than that. Mason called only once, after everything. I was rocking Ilara to sleep when the phone rang. His name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a moment, then set the phone down. I used to be the woman he thought was weak, the pawn he could move around in his little game of deception. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I didn't need his explanation, and I certainly didn't need his permission for my silence. There are wounds that don't need to scream to reach the core. Nova chose to observe in silence, to prepare, and then to rise, calmly, like a mother, and clear-eyed, like a woman who had been betrayed to her bones. Her story reminds us that the deepest revenge doesn't come from rage. It comes from reclaiming ourselves, rebuilding our lives, and walking forward in peace, once the person who hurt us no longer belongs in the world we've created. What do you think about Nova's choice and how she faced betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional and meaningful stories about family and life.